I think some of you know that earlier this week, I traveled to Massachusetts to be with my sister Emma while she gave birth to twin boys. I don't quite have words yet for the experience, but wow. I've had 3 children myself, but I had never been in the room with a loved one giving birth. And there were 2 of them at the same time. Emma is planning to raise these boys on her own, without a partner. So the presence of family and friends mattered deeply. And for me, the privilege of being there, of bearing witness, of holding space for the miracle and mystery of what was unfolding, was an enormous gift. There were tears and laughter, pain and prayers, blood and sweat, fear and joy, relief and peace, exhaustion and love. It was messy and overwhelming and holy. And then I came home and I opened our gospel reading for today, which begins, "Now the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place in this way." And I have to admit, after what I had just witnessed, that opening felt a little jarring, because Matthew goes on to describe almost nothing about Jesus' birth. No labor, no body, no pain, no blood, no cries in the night, no room full of women holding breath or holding hands. Instead, Matthew tells us about Joseph. This account of the Annunciation is not my favorite version of the Christmas story. I prefer Luke's gospel, the one that centers Mary. It's beautiful and brave and embodied. Mary sings the Magnificat. Mary consents to all that's happening. Mary carries this miracle in her own body. It's a key point, right? Matthew's telling is quieter, more restrained. And yes, it's focused almost entirely on Joseph. In seminary, we really loved to pull this apart. How do you take a story about a miraculous pregnancy and make it all about the guy who literally wasn't involved at all? How do you shift the focus away from the one whose body bears the cost? And yet, Matthew insists on telling it this way, which makes me wonder if Matthew is inviting us to pay attention to something else. Not the physical reality of birth, which Luke's gospel gives us, but the interior work of receiving God when God comes in ways we did not expect. Because in Matthew's gospel, the miracle does not begin with joy. It begins with disruption. Mary is pregnant. Joseph knows that the child is not his. And suddenly, everything he thought he knew about his life is in question. Matthew tells us that Joseph is a righteous man. And that matters, because it means Joseph is not careless, he's not cruel, he's not reactive. Joseph is doing the best he can with the information he has. When he discovers that Mary is pregnant, he does what so many of us do when life takes an unexpected turn. He tries to regain control. He thinks carefully, he weighs his options, he makes a plan that feels both lawful and compassionate. Matthew says he plans to dismiss her quietly, to avoid public disgrace, to minimize harm. It's a decent plan in a world where women who conceived outside of marriage commonly faced shunning or violence or worse. It's a plan shaped by kindness in a harsh world. And yet, it turns out it's not God's plan. Sometimes our most thoughtful, well-intentioned decisions still fall short of what God is doing. Joseph does not hear God while he's planning. He hears God only after he has reached the end of his own certainty. Only when the plan is settled, only when Joseph thinks he knows what he will do, does God speak. And God does not speak with thunder or spectacle. God speaks in a dream. this fragile, quiet thing, a thing Joseph could have easily dismissed. And the message is simple. Do not be afraid. Which tells us something. It tells us that Joseph is afraid. Afraid of scandal, afraid of misunderstanding, afraid of what faithfulness might cost him, afraid of stepping into a future he cannot explain or control. God does not shame that fear. God names it. And then God invites Joseph to move anyway. Joseph is not asked to understand anything. He's not promised ease or protection. He's asked to listen. And Matthew tells us with stunning restraint, when Joseph awoke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. That's it. No speech, no debate, no song, just trust. That's not heroic certainty. It's deep, faithful listening. Kind of amazing, actually, this openness to where the Spirit is leading. Joseph does not know how the story will unfold. He only knows what the next faithful step is. And that is so often how God works. Not by giving us the whole picture, but by asking us to trust with the next small, maybe costly yes. And this may be where, for us, this story starts to feel uncomfortably close. Because we like clarity, we like certainty, we like knowing how things will turn out before we commit. But Advent, this season we're in, tells a different truth. Advent faith does not look like confidence. It looks like openness. It looks like listening in the dark, like trusting when the future is unclear, or when the math doesn't totally add up. Have you ever had an experience like that when you've weighed all the options and you know what a reasonable decision might be, but there's something deeper that keeps calling? Advent faith is like choosing love over self-protection. Joseph teaches us that trust is not passive, it's courageous. It might cost him reputation, it might cost him control, it might cost him the comfort of having to explain his life to others, and yet it is through that trust that God comes to dwell among us. Because here's the quiet miracle at the center of this story. God becomes Emmanuel, God with us, because someone listened. Because Joseph listened, Mary was not abandoned. Because Joseph listened, a child was named Jesus. Because Joseph listened, God found a home among us. Christmas does not arrive through certainty or power or force. It arrives through trust, through willingness, through many small, faithful acts. Matthew tells us that the child will be called Emmanuel, God with us. Not God above us, not God far away, not God waiting for us to get it all right. God with us. Joseph never speaks a word in this story, but his listening makes room for God. And that matters, because Emmanuel does not force his way into the world. God waits to be received. That's what Advent has been teaching us all along. The first week, we talked about awakening, noticing how God is already at work in the world around us. And in the second week, we talked about preparing, how to make room in our lives and to live as though the future were already here. And last week, we talked about seeing, how to look for the signs of hope and healing around us. And now on the edge of Christmas, we might think about hearing, listening for God's quiet voice among the fear and noise of these times. listening for when God interrupts our plans, listening for when openness feels risky or unclear, because God still comes this way, not always with answers, but always with invitation. And the good news is this: God does not wait for us to be fearless. God does not wait for us to be certain. God just waits for us to be willing, to listen, to trust, to take the next faithful step. As Christmas draws near, we remember that Emmanuel did not come once long ago and then disappear. Emmanuel is still coming, still with us, still asking for room. Room in our lives, room in our choices, room in our love. May we, like Joseph, have the courage to listen. May we have the faith to act without certainty. And may we discover again and again that when we make room for God, God can make a home among us. Amen.